Okay, today I'm going to show you how to make the gear train mechanism. The materials you're going to need are the big metal build plate. I'm going to set that off to the side for now. 2 of the flat rectangle pieces. 1 of the right angle metal pieces. 4 of the bushings. 4 of the collars, 2 axles, a handle, the long and short hex driver, some of the hex nuts, red screws, blue screws, green screws, and 4 threaded beams. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take 1 of the threaded beams and 1 of the flat metal rectangle pieces, and I'm going to put a threaded beam in each corner of the flat rectangle piece using a red screw. So I put the threaded beam on one side of the rectangle, the red screw on the other side. You want to use red for these. Screw the threaded beam on there. And again, I'm going to do that in each corner of this flat rectangle. So I've got 1 threaded beam in each corner. Now I'm going to take the other flat rectangle piece and attach it to here so it makes like a sandwich. But I'm only going to put red screws in 2 corners, and in the other 2 corners I'm going to leave them empty for now. So I'm going to take a red screw and put it in just 2 of the corners. And you'll probably notice that it's much more difficult to get it tight with just your hand on this part. When we're building a robot, we don't want to just finger tighten the screws because it's not going to make a solid robot. It's going to rattle around, things are going to come loose and fall off. So we're going to take the short hex driver, and you can use either end. You can use this end or this end, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to put it in the hole of the screw and turn it righty-tighty so that they're nice and tight. Now you don't want to make it super tight so that you'll never be able to get it undone later on, but you do want it to be good and tight so that it's not loose and rattling around, because that'll make it, later on that'll cause a lot of problems. So notice I left 2 of the holes empty for right now. Okay, I'm going to take the right angle piece and I'm going to attach it to the sandwich, again using red screws, but they're going to go through the right angle piece. I don't know if you can see that, the screws in there, and then it's going to go in the threaded beam too. So I'm joining the right angle piece to my sandwich framework using a red screw. Having difficulty getting things lined up right. I'm going to take my hex driver and use that to get this tightened. There we go. That one was a stubborn one. Same thing on the other corner. again with a red screw. And there you have it. The red screws down here are holding that right angle piece on. Nothing jiggles around or is loose. I've got all the screws nice and tight. Okay, I'm going to take the big metal build plate and I'm going to attach my framework onto the build plate. You can put it this way, you can put it this way, you can put it near the edge, you can put it near the middle. It really doesn't matter. For this step, you will want blue screws. Alright, I'm going to take a blue screw in each corner, but you're going to need to use a hex nut on the underside of the build plate. So you find, see that blue screw right there? I'm going to put the hex nut on the screw and turn it, and notice that the teeth are against the metal. I'm going to do the same thing on the other corner here. Blue screw into the corner, hex nut underneath, turning it with my hand, teeth against the metal. Again, I'm going to use my short hex driver and make sure that those screws are good and tight. You may have to hold on to the nut underneath while you turn it. And now when I shake it, we call that the shake test. If nothing's rattling, then it's good. It means your screws are tight. Okay, the next step is I'm going to put the bushings on. But I just realized that I forgot a part. You're also going to need 2 gears. Can't have a gear train without gears, right? Okay, we're going to put the bushing on the metal framework. Now, why are we using a bushing? Well, let me show you. If I just put the gear on the axle like this, so it can turn, and I put it in the metal framework and spin it, you can see how much that bounces around and rattles in there. That would not make a smooth running robot. All that rattling is going to cause lots of problems if you were actually building a robot at this point. Alright, it's because the axle is a square shape and the hole that it goes in is a square shape. So what we need to do is put these bushings on there so that the axle can go through them and it'll make it turn much, much smoother. Now when you do a bushing, you can do it horizontally like this. You can turn it vertically like this. It doesn't matter. Notice that there's 3 holes. In 2 holes you want screws, and in the other hole goes the axle. It doesn't matter if you use a screw here, and then the axle in this one, or the axle in the middle, or on the ends. It doesn't matter which one, but you want 2 of them to have screws and 1 of them to have an axle. So I'm going to go ahead and put it, just check my size, make sure my gear is still going to fit. It is. So I'm going to put it this way. And you'll want to use green screws. You always use green screws on the bushings. The blue and the red just aren't long enough. So I'm going to put a green screw through here. See that? Take a hex nut, put it on the back side of the screw. And then you can turn the nut or turn the screw, whatever's easier for you. Okay, another green screw. Put it on this end. Whoops. Put it on that end. Hex nut on the back side. Short hex driver. Get them tight. So now my axle will spin smoother, but I notice it's still rattling around on the back side. So the best way to fix that is we're going to put a bushing on the back side as well. So I'm going to figure out where my bushing is on the front, pass this all the way through, and that tells me where I want my bushing to go on the back, so that they're straight across from each other. Same process. Green screw on each end. Put a hex nut on the back. Now notice that I'm using the hex nut, which is the one with the circle of teeth on it like that, on the backs of screws. This one kind of looks similar, but that's a collar, and that goes on the axle, and it's what's going to hold the axle in place later on. Okay, I'm going to put another green screw on here. Attached with a hex nut on the back side. Use my short hex driver and tighten them. And now my axle goes through the middle there, goes through the middle there. Okay, the gear has a square-shaped hole in the middle. Simply slides right onto the axle. And now you'll see that it turns much, much smoother. But there's still a problem. Watch, the gear can slide forward and fall out of here. Right? Could fall right out. Or the gear itself could fall off. And if this was a robot, that would be really bad. So we got to be able to keep the axle from sliding out and keep the gear on. So the way we do that is with the collars. Now the collar is the metal circle right here, and notice that it's got the black screw in the edge of it. Okay? For the collar, you use the long, skinny hex driver. Simply slide your collar over the axle, and then use your hex driver to tighten it. Now, if your collar won't slide over the axle, then you're going to have to loosen this tiny little screw. It's called a set screw. If I turn it left, you can see the screw comes out. If I turn it right, if you look inside the hole part, you'll see the screw go into the hole. Okay, that's how we tighten these collars on. So I slide the collar over the end of the axle here. Use my hex driver, the long hex driver, and tighten that set screw. So now my gear won't fall off, but my axle still slides a lot. So on the back side, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a collar, remember that's the one with the set screw, slide it on the back of the axle. Now notice, I'm going to leave just a tiny little gap here. I don't know if you can see. Okay? I want to leave a tiny little gap between the collar and the bushing when I tighten this collar. So if you look at it, see how it's got just a little bit of wiggle room. If you push that collar all the way against the bushing and squeeze it in there tight, it won't spin very freely. But now you can see it spins nice and smooth without any problem at all. Okay, to finish your gear tree, you're simply going to add a second gear the same way you did the first gear. So that means you're going to need a bushing on each side. Remember, bushings get attached with a green screw and a hex nut on the inside, an axle with a collar on each end. One collar, this collar holds the gear on, and it also doesn't allow it to go this direction. This collar doesn't allow it to go that direction. So it's locked in there. Okay? I'm going to add my second gear here, and then I'll have a completed gear train. I'm going to pause this video for just a little bit.